Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in.
Noah, welcome back from Japan. How does it feel to be back in San Francisco?
Thanks. It feels great. I love, returning to a nation in the middle of a collapse.
Yeah, as soon as Noah left for Japan, our economic situation disintegrated, and it's funny we haven't done a podcast in like a week and a half because it's perfect week for Econ 102 to help explain what's going on and make sense, because a lot of people are spouting a lot of economic arguments that are either wrong or contradict each other, or it's just kind of mayhem right now. Is that your sense too, or are you making sense of things?
Absolute mayhem. That's right. So I wrote a post the other day outlining essentially every argument I saw in favor of Trump's tariffs. And it was on, I have my thing where I paywall one post out of every three, every third post. And so I paywalled it. And then people were like, wait a second, now I can't just send this to my friends who believe in the MAGA stuff. And so I unpaywalled it. So now that post is now free. But then still, I think that people tended not to pay as much attention to it because, there were, when Trump did this big walk back the other day, there was this sense like, oh, it's over, tariffs are fake, Trump blinked, it was walk back. But no, it's not. That's not true. The tariffs on Canada and Mexico are still there, which are our biggest, most important trading partners. And there's sectoral tariffs on autos, with more tariffs ready to be rolled out on other things. And then, of course, there's gigantic tariffs on China, but that's even, even beyond that. Then there's a 10% tariff on the whole world. So you got 10% tariff on the whole world, then 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and then sectoral tariffs in addition to the China tariffs. We're still in massive, massive tariff zone here. And so, I think the idea that, oh, it's over, guys, false alarm, it's wrong.
Yeah. And so our original hope, or people's, the most positive scenario you could imagine here, is that Trump did targeted tariffs on China and was just using it for negotiating leverage with other countries, but didn't actually mean it. But that's not, in fact, what's happened. He, in fact, has imposed sort of what he's calling reciprocal tariffs on basically the whole world, because he doesn't like trade deficits. Or what exactly is he doing?
We don't know what exactly he's doing, but we have some ideas. We have some clues. So one thing that's clear is that Trump views, probably on the advice of Peter Navarro, his main economic advisor, Trump probably views trade deficits as a trade barrier in and of themselves. So if you see that your country has a trade deficit with some other countries, then, you're like, well, they must have some trade barriers. They must have some trade barriers that amount to shadow tariffs on us. And of course, that's sometimes true. There's countries erect plenty of non-tariff trade barriers toward other countries, usually with regulatory differences. You say, oh, to sell products in our country, you have to jump through this and that regulatory hoop that it's really easy for domestic companies to jump through and hard for foreign companies. So there are such a thing as non-tariff barriers. And then, sometimes those are done for the purpose of restricting trade, and sometimes those are just done because people like regulating things in different ways. Sometimes you really want. So for example, in Japan, the most famous non-tariff barrier they have for U.S. autos is that they have limitations on the weight. They have weight limitations because Japan, in case you ever go there, you notice the roads are all in nice repair. Well, one reason is because they don't have the cars aren't as heavy, and so the wear and tear on the roads is much less, and so they're like, okay, well, just don't have heavy cars. But what kind of cars do Americans make? Heavy cars. Or that's at least the kind of cars that we make that's not similar to the kind of cars Japanese companies make. So, sure, they could buy a sedan from Ford, but why would you? Right. But in terms of American SUVs, they tear up the roads. And so Japan's like, well, no, you have to pay a tax, or you have to pay, there's limitations about the weight limitations. So that's an example of a non-tariff barrier that wasn't for the purpose of restricting trade. Or it might have been, some Japanese legislators might have been like, if we do this thing, they might not be able to sell cars here and we can win. And then some people are like, well, look, we don't want to tear up the roads, guys. Those things are monstrous and they don't fit on Japanese roads anyway. So, these non-tariff barriers do exist, but then most of the trade deficit's probably not due to the non-tariff barriers. Most of the trade deficit's probably due to financial factors. Like a lot of the tariff barriers are due to financial factors, and the Navarro and the people in the White House are just not. They don't understand economics. They don't think about economics. They discount the advice of any economist other than Peter Navarro, and they don't know what's going on. So a lot of the trade deficits are due to financial factors, which these guys are labeling as tariffs, and they set their quote unquote reciprocal tariff rates at rates they thought would eliminate the trade deficit. As far as we can tell, these rates were set using AI. They just populated a list with AI. The indications, the main indication of that is that the list was populated with there's like some rocks in the middle of the Pacific that have no human habitation on them that we tariffed. And so that looks like an autofill list. As for the formula they used, it's clear that, here, my best forensic sort of assessment here is that the first thing they did was they said, okay, we're going to set our tariffs equal to their trade deficit. Okay, the trade deficit's in dollars, and obviously our trade deficit with larger countries is larger. And then our trade deficit is dollars, and so we want it as some percent, right? So what percent are we going to do? So they divided the trade deficit by the amount of a country's exports to us. And they said that's the percentage rate. And so that's going to be our tariff rate. That's going to stop it. And then they asked GPT to justify it. And GPT hallucinated some numbers from some papers. It said, okay, but, and made up the formula is, if you assume an extremely simple 2-country model of trade, and then you make some other assumptions on top of that, which are unrealistic, then that is the formula that would get you a zero trade deficit. But then it depends on some parameters, some numbers with like Greek letters there. What are those numbers? So I assume it's ChatGPT that pulled a number of like 4 out of some paper that some people did. Then the people were like, wait a second, the number's actually not 4, it's like 1. They did it 4 times too high. But the thing is, if you tell ChatGPT to come up with a justification for some formula and come up with an academic justification, it will hallucinate. Like it will pull fake numbers out of real papers. Like it does that. That's a very standard method of hallucination, is to pull fake numbers out of real papers. Like everyone knows about the like miscitation problem in LLMs. And so they probably just pulled that and it just hallucinated a number. And then the people wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying like, wait a second, this is the wrong number. You used the wrong number. So at this point, it's very hard to tell human stupidity from artificial stupidity guided by human stupidity. It's like, are we dealing with cyborg stupidity, pure machine stupidity, or just pure human stupidity? It's hard to tell, but it's stupid because the numbers are wrong. The formula doesn't apply. And the point is that on top of all that, this is like a moot, how high should these tariffs be is a moot question, because these trade deficits, it's not worth, fucking up your whole economy just to chase down these trade deficits. The trade deficits are due to financial reasons. And if you want to deal with them, you should deal with them in the financial realm. Except maybe from China, which is dishing out a whole shit ton of subsidies. So like maybe you should do tariffs there, and then then fix the financial stuff.
And what would it mean to deal with it in the financial realm?
So think about this. If the dollar were a lot weaker, then people would buy more American stuff. It'd be cheaper. Why can't the dollar weaken? Because one of the leading theories is that everybody wants dollars because dollars are like the safe haven currency. Well, Trump may have just inadvertently dealt with this in a way that will reduce our trade deficit by killing America's status as a safe haven currency, by basically scaring all the international people, all the other countries, just scaring the hell out of them. So they just leave America. The dollar loses its reserve currency status and we get capital flight. We may be seeing that now. We're seeing bond yields rise a lot and the dollar plunge. So that's what my next post is going to be about, capital flight from America. So we may actually be fixing that, but that's going to come, at a price, because it's going to be highly disruptive to our financial system, and the financial system of the world. The dollar's law. So we actually did mostly lose the reserve currency status in like the 80s and early 90s. If you notice, like America's, the dollar percent of reserves went to like 25% or something. And so we could see something like that happen now. And so we could see that. It would be painful if it happens. And so that could be a result. So in other words, scaring everybody into thinking that America is not a good place to invest will in some ways make us poorer, but then could be the solution to this. And I would have picked a different solution. I would have picked a, exchange rate intervention where you basically just get the Fed to sell the dollar, right? Print money, buy other currencies, etc. We can go on and on about capital flight and what the problem is. The problem is it's inflationary.
The
problem with this is it's the way it hurts us is it pushes up higher inflation, and that we're not going to like that. So anyway,
and what is the mechanism by which like capital flight would or would not occur? Is if other sort of countries sort of coordinate or find
they sell bonds. They don't have to coordinate. They just all panic at the same time. Like panic is contagious, right?
And when did it happen last time, or what caused it last time?
Last time, basically the Plaza Accord was part of it. We intentionally weakened the dollar.
True.
And so that was a coordinated thing where we basically had a coordinated exchange rate intervention with our major trading partners, Japan and Europe. And we said, everybody weaken the dollar.
For to get rid of the deficit? Or
yeah, the idea was to get rid of the trade deficit. It didn't actually, well, it did reduce America's trade deficit somewhat. So we did reduce our trade deficit. We didn't reduce our trade deficit with Japan, which was the main country we wanted to reduce trade. We didn't reduce our bilateral trade deficit, but we reduced our overall trade deficit. And we did reduce our trade deficit with Europe. So there was, because Japan wasn't considered a safe haven currency, so people didn't move their money to Japan. One thing people don't realize is that, and that I'm going to have to explain, and this is a hard thing to explain, so I have to sit there for a while thinking like, what's a easy way to explain this? But it is something that I did teach in Real Econ 102. It's this like Miles Kimball spends a lot of time on this. How financial factors drive these trade deficits, and so ironically, Trump's tariffs may actually end up addressing our trade deficits. That may now happen. But the point is that trade deficits aren't like the biggest deal in an economy. Like trade deficits can be a problem, but they're not, ultimately they don't make us poorer like Trump thinks. So addressing these trade deficits may come with quite a bit of economic pain for regular Americans.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Why do they care so much? Or why did we in the past, with the situation in the past, you mentioned the Plaza Accord, why did we care about the trade deficit? Is it because of the argument of sort of hollows out manufacturing or deindustrialize America? Is that the main argument?
Yeah, exactly. And this was probably when Trump was watching a lot of TV and formed a lot of his opinions. And we had the Rust Belt phenomenon in the late 70s and early 80s, which was probably not really due to competition from overseas. Like maybe a tiny bit, but mostly the Rust Belt was due to a combination of a lot of things, but then one of them was the Volcker recessions, which we had to do to get rid of inflation in the 80s. And then probably the loss of our clustering effect from like the Northeast no longer being a real like locus of manufacturing. Also, some of the restrictions that we ourselves put on manufacturing were responsible for the Rust Belt. And then, yeah, and sort of but I think that foreign competition was probably only a small part of what happened in the late 70s and early 80s to reduce our manufacturing. There was also some automation, like that was actually the biggest burst of factory automation we had. That was the coming of computer controlled machine tools was a bigger deal so far than robots have been. Actually, when you look at the progress in robots, it's been really slow, but then suddenly there was this explosion of like machine tools that could do a lot of the things that operators of analog machine tools used to do. You could just punch in some numbers, have, some random person punch in some numbers, and then machine does all this stuff. That was the big automation burst. So these were a lot of possibilities. We don't exactly know why the Rust Belt happened, but there's a number of things. International trade was probably a relatively small part of it because our trade with like Japan and Germany and all those countries was actually like manufactured trade was actually much smaller, and our trade deficits certainly much smaller. Our trade deficits with China or our China's manufacturing substitution, like the amount of jobs we shipped to China was just incomparably bigger than the amount of like competition from like, Toyota or some shit. And so really, but then we did think that the trade deficit was a problem, and we did the Plaza Accord to address that. And then that was part of the, part of the fallout from this was that the dollar got weaker, and that, and that the reserve currency shifted toward other currencies like the pound and the Deutschmark, and there was no euro at the time, right? Maybe not to the end, but then financial flows did, like people put more money in Europe. That may happen again right now. We're seeing that happen again right now with the euro strengthening.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. It's a bull market. It's a bear market. Rates will rise or fall. Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days and not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/102. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102. Every time I hop on the 101 freeway in SF, I look up at the various tech billboards and think, damn, turpentine should definitely be up there. And I bet I'm not alone. In a world of endless scrolling and ad blockers, sometimes the most powerful way to reach people is in the real world. That's where AdQuick comes in. The easiest way to book out-of-home ads, like billboards, vehicle wraps, and airport displays. The same way you would order an Uber. Started by Instacart alums, AdQuick was born from their own personal struggles to book and measure ad success. AdQuick's audience targeting, campaign management, and analytics bring the precision and efficiency of digital to the real world. Ready to get your brand the attention it deserves? Visit adquick.com today to start reaching your customers in the real world. Again, that's adquick.com.
Yeah. And so what do people misunderstand? You wrote about why the deficit isn't such a bad thing and why it can actually be good in some ways. When you unpack that a bit further.
Trade deficits are essentially a loan. Someone buys our bonds and we buy their stuff. And two things can then happen. Number one, at some point, that flips and they buy our stuff and we buy their bonds instead. And then the trade deficit turns to a trade surplus and essentially the loan gets paid back, right? That's one thing that can happen. The other thing that can happen is that we basically inflate away the value of our bonds. And so then, or I mean, they can also just so we can also inflate away the value of our bonds. Or we can default, actually. So I actually do believe that the Trump team is going to start looking at a sovereign default. They're going to start looking at having the U.S. default on its bonds. That will be the real thing that crushes, if that happens, or if even people significantly think that it's going to happen, that will crush the American economy. We'll be really fucked. Our banks will fail. Well, that's 2008 level of fuckage at that point. So once they start talking about sovereign default in public, head for the hills. Because I do think that they probably will. Because, Trump declares bankruptcy. That's what he does. He's like, wait, debt? This is a piece of paper. I don't have to pay you. You borrowed the money, dumbass. I'm not going to pay back. So he doesn't pay back. And so I think that he's going to look at sovereign default. He's going to say, it's not my fault. I didn't borrow this money, which is, yeah, he did. He borrowed a lot of it, and he's trying to borrow even more with like planned tax cuts, right? Trump is planning to borrow huge amounts more, but I think that, to bring that down there, you could do austerity, you could do tax hikes, and you could do spending cuts. But I think instead he's going to look at sovereign default.
Even though he knows it'll be massively unpopular?
That's right. And so I think what he might do is what he did with the Afghanistan withdrawal, he might try to pull the same trick, which is he might wait till the end of his term, put in motion the stuff for a sovereign default, but then do it, time it so that it's his successor who has to carry it through and basically has no choice but to carry through with the default. He might try something like that. But it's going to be difficult to make that work because once you start talking about a sovereign default, a lot of factors happen to immediately push you into sovereign default. So, once it's a disorderly process, and basically a default would probably be forced before he leaves office. So, he could leave office with the economy in massive disarray. I mean, Bush did, right? We had this massive increase in unemployment. I would say if we had a sovereign default, I mean, all our banks fail. And that's going to be worse than 2008 because our banks didn't actually fail. They got bailed out and they pulled back on lending, but they didn't actually die. But like all these banks own U.S. treasuries, right? And if we default on the U.S. debt, we wouldn't default on the entire U.S. debt. So their assets don't go to zero, but they become insolvent. Like treasuries are treated as a safe asset. Like people basically assume that these treasuries will never lose their value. So if you start to see they're talking about making treasuries take a 15% haircut or something, right? That's a default. The treasuries don't go to zero. They go to 85%, but still that sends every bank into insolvency because banks have borrowed a lot, banks have lent a lot, and then a lot of their lending is actually just buying treasuries, right? And so if the treasuries lose value, they have this capital cushion, and then basically the bank becomes insolvent because the value of the capital, the value of their assets goes down below the value of their liabilities. They become insolvent, and then they then that bank will fail. There'll be a run on the bank. People pull their money out. There'll be a disorderly unwind, and then lending to the American economy just basically freezes up. Bank lending, also like every other financial institution that depends on banks, like hedge funds and private equity and all these things, bond markets. I mean, banks handle a lot of that stuff. That just freezes up, and so no company can borrow. Companies just immediately start laying off workers. Workers stop consuming. I'm going to have to write a number of posts about what happens if there's a sovereign default, because Trump and his team are certainly going to think about it. And Trump's already made a few noises in that direction that only Joe Weisenthal noticed.
That's interesting. Yeah. When your post comes out, we'll do a deeper dive on it. Let's go back to some of the tariff arguments. We just addressed the deficit one. Another one that you address that other people make is, hey, this is actually, we're taking the short-term pain, long-term gain now of sort of, getting on the path of reindustrializing America. This is going to make us sort of, better long-term footing geopolitically, even if there is some economic, short-term pain among Wall Street or whatever. That is, I'm paraphrasing what some people say. Why is that totally wrong?
The question is, what's the long-term gain here? America produces the amount of stuff that we produce. Right. And so the trade deficit is certainly like a loan that we take from other countries in some sense to consume more today. And so fixing the trade deficit would reduce our consumption. So that's painful. The question is, what do we get? Suppose that you're buying food every month on your credit card and then you stop. What's the long-term gain that you get from that? What do you think is the long-term gain from no longer buying food on the credit card?
Nothing. What is the long-term gain from?
I mean, you could say you're more financially stable. So in other words, by the danger of buying food on the credit card is that someday there's a day when you're going to have to stop buying food because you've racked up too much credit card debt. So you can't keep doing this. So, but the solution in this case of no longer buying food on the credit card is to simply bring that day forward from the future into today. You say, I'm going to stop buying food today. So the gain is that there's no day in the future when you have to stop buying food because you did it today. That's the gain. The gain is that you got it over with. You ripped off a Band-Aid. You took your lumps. You took this, time in the future when you would have had to work hard to pay back this loan, and you instead said, well, I'll just pay back today instead. So in other words, the gain tomorrow is that you did all the pain today and no longer have that pain looming in the future tomorrow. That's the gain. Right. That's not the gain Trump and his people are thinking of. And it's not a real gain, right? Because it's just saying you have pain today or pain tomorrow. Let's do pain today. Let's get it over with. That's an argument. If you want to say, let's get this pain over with, let's have pain now, or we'll have pain tomorrow. Respect. Let's become a more prudent, financially sound, forward-looking sort of country and just do our pain today.
Yeah. Got it.
And but Trump and his people have this idea that it's going to bring back U.S. manufacturing. Here's the problem. If trade deficits just, magically vanished, America's manufacturing will benefit. And in fact, if there's capital flight from America, you will see in the long term, you could actually see American manufacturing be on a stronger footing. although that might require debt default. And so there's, I have to now write more stuff about why this will result in sort of long-term screwage as well, because when you have a debt default, then people permanently don't trust your financial system, and like it takes decades to build it back up. And we've seen third world countries all go through this in Russia. Anyway, so I'll have to write another thing about why you don't get the long-term manufacturing gains as much when you try to default your way to export competitiveness. Okay, so that's actually does, something that sounds like it should work but doesn't really work. But the point is that tariffs really screw your manufacturing. They screw your manufacturing because they make it expensive to import intermediate inputs. That includes machinery for your factories or software to run that machinery. It includes components and parts. It includes raw materials. Okay, all these things you need to import in order to run like a manufacturing economy. Okay, and everybody else imports these things too. Like China has been trying to cut off these imports, but China imported tons of capital goods from Germany. Where do you think all the machinery, you look at these videos of like these amazing Chinese like factories with all the machines that do like absolutely everything for you, and it's this wonderfully automated factory. Where do they get those machines? Well, recently they've been making a lot of those machines themselves, but until recently they were getting them from Germany and to some degree from Japan. Like those machines were made elsewhere and shipped to China. And China's manufacturing powerhouseness was built on these foreign machines. And when you tariff those foreign machines, when you cut yourself off from those foreign machines, how are you going to reindustrialize? You have to build your own machines. Well, now you have to relearn how to build machines. So that's difficult and expensive, and it means you can specialize less, right? You have to build the machines, the parts, the components. You have to dig up the raw materials and do the mining. You have to cut down the lumber. You have to do absolutely everything in-house. That means you can't specialize. It's a lot harder to do supply chaining. That means you're trying to run an economy with this. America has 330 million people. Like you're trying to do everything with 330 million people. That's not efficient, right? That's not an efficient way to do things. We need to do the stuff that's more labor intensive. We need to do that in like India or Mexico or somewhere. The stuff that's more, that Japanese companies know how to do, we need to get them to do that part of it, or Korean companies know how to do, and we need to specialize in the stuff we do. We need to build up this big gang if we're going to balance out China. And Scott Bessent knows that. And he actually said this the other day. He said the U.S., what we need to do is build up a U.S.-centric trading system so that we can balance out China. That's correct. It was called the TPP. We were gonna try to do it, a decade ago, and then Trump fucked it because these guys don't understand this. They don't understand international trade. They don't think about it. They think that an economy of 330 million people could do everything for itself, and that there'll be no that will be efficient and competitive, because there was a time 100 years ago when economies were much, much, much less efficient than they are now and tended to do everything themselves. And we did all these things ourselves for World War II in this time when trade was much less important. And we were very large relative to the world economy. We had in World War II, we were doing like half the world's manufacturing. Right. And of course you do it all yourself, because we didn't do it all ourselves. Actually, we still we were getting huge amounts of raw materials from like Latin America and stuff. Trump's putting tariffs even on that stuff. Trump's even putting tariffs on raw materials. Like he's stupid. He's just swinging a baseball bat in the store of America. He's wrecking the shop.
And why is it a bad argument that he's doing it for some sort of negotiating leverage and that, some of them will be dropped at some point?
Well, first of all, the so-called walkback that you saw this week, which was a partial walkback, that walkback did not involve negotiations. Like, there were no deals made, right? He just saw, oh, this sucks. And they did whatever they could to try to arrest the suckage, which arrested the fall in the stock market to some degree, but did not arrest the fall in the bond market, which is much more dangerous and important. So that happened, but you didn't see deals being made. And so here's the thing. You just put tariffs on 90 countries. How are you going to make 90 deals? Like each of those people, their leader has to meet with Trump, hammer out a deal, right? Maybe you could make deals with like Japan, Europe, and a few others. That takes a long time, and it adds uncertainty. It takes months just to make deals with like a few important trading partners, Canada, Mexico. You can make deals with them. It will take months. You can't make deals with 90 countries. You just can't. And then you've got half of the Trump team getting up there in public and saying it's not actually negotiation. We just want to reduce the trade deficit. No negotiation. We want to raise tariffs until trade deficits go away. That's what Navarro says. I think Besant is out there saying like, oh no, it's a negotiation. It's art of the deal. So when you have half the Trump team saying we don't actually want to negotiate, this is not a negotiation, what are we supposed to think, right? Besides the logistical difficulty of doing all these deals. And then there's a question of like, what could they offer us? Remember that Trump and his people are interpreting trade deficits as tariffs when they're not. What could they offer us? Like, so in practice, what they'll try to do is get them to pay us tribute. They'll say, okay, you just have your government buy certain amounts of our goods so our trade deficit go away. In fact, we actually did this to Japan. Japan like actually made commitments to purchase certain amounts of American goods. It was a small symbolic purchase, but they actually did this. So Trump might try to do this to a level that actually gets rid of the trade deficit. We had this little trade war with Japan in the early 90s, which was stupid, in which we got them to like make purchase commitments to like buy a few of our semiconductors, and like it didn't, they bought some of our memory chips and it didn't help anything. And anyway, so like that was stupid. I think they also bought a few of our cars, and like it didn't help. It was a small amount. Trump and company might try to extract tribute from these other countries. They're not going to go for that. That's not worth it. Because remember, almost none of these countries, like maybe a few small countries like the Dominican Republic, or maybe Canada might pay us tribute if we lean on them hard enough. But although that'd be very hard to get them to do, but like most countries, they'll just look for other export markets. Remember, the United States is like 13% of China's exports. And if you even include indirect stuff, it's like a fifth, right? China's like, okay, fine, a fifth of our exports. Fuck you. And America, we just tariffed like 100% of our imports. But any one country, it's only like 20% of their exports. So like, what are they going to do? They're going to find new markets. What are we going to do? We're not. Okay. We don't have the leverage. We don't have the cards there. And so there's no, we don't have the leverage to make them eliminate bilateral trade deficits by having their governments pay us tribute and buy our shit. Stuff that we don't even have. Like, how can we don't even have stuff to offer them. Like when Trump made a deal with China in his first term, it was to buy our farm goods. Now they reneged on that deal and didn't actually buy it. But if they had bought it, yes, fine, we would have been able to produce a little more farm goods. But the point is now, to pay us tribute, they've got to buy stuff that we don't even have. Like stuff that we assure them that our factories will eventually make, even while our factories are like deindustrializing, like factory investments falling off a cliff because of all this stupid economic uncertainty. So there's no deals to be made. There's no deals that anyone could make here. Like, what could the deal be? Like, think off the top of your head. If you can think of something that I can't think of, because like, I just can't think of what the deal could possibly be. I can think of commitment to buy American goods. Where are the American goods? They don't exist yet. Who's going to do the investment? Especially with the fucking tariffs preventing you from like being able to invest.
Well, basically any country that has tariffs on us could be dropping their stuff, right?
They could, but the tariffs on us are tiny. They're like, we're talking like 3% tariffs here. Like we're putting like Trump's, we're putting at least 10% tariffs on them. And the Liberation Day tariffs would have been like 40% or something, 25, 40%. Like they're going to drop their 3% tariff. That's going to do nothing. Vietnam offered to drop its tariffs on us to zero from like a low, it was like 5% or something. And then Navarro said, this offer has no meaning. Like, I mean, he's right, because that tariff is a pittance compared to what we were going to put on them and compared to what we're still going to put on them. And like, what can they do? Yeah, sure, they can drop their tariffs on us to zero. It does nothing. Their tariffs on us are tiny.
Yeah.
Because remember, Trump and company are interpreting trade deficits as as evidence of secret silent tariffs. Those secret silent tariffs don't actually fucking exist. It's made up in Navarro's head. Okay, it's not real. It's a wazy, it's a wazzy, it's a woozy, it's it's whatever Matthew McConaughey says in that movie, right? Wolf of Wall Street. It's like, it's not fucking real, man. Because those secret silent tariffs are not real. Yeah, no, I was just saying, so there's nothing they can do other than have their government pay us tribute, which is not worth it to them. No one's going to do that.
Well, let's go to China, because that's like the biggest player. How is China reacting to this? How do we expect China to react to this? What position is China now in?
So China put tariffs of 125% on our goods. They're like, okay, you want to put insanely high tariffs on us? We'll put insanely high tariffs on you. Okay, fine, says China. Because China knows they can find other export markets. They can still export some stuff indirectly to the United States through third countries. And the only way because America does not have the data on component sourcing. We don't know when something from Vietnam or Mexico was actually made in, the parts were all made in China and then shipped there to be hastily assembled and, reshipped onto us. We don't know when that's happening because we don't have good government data, and Trump and his administration are at work making our data worse by firing, and Doge, I will say, they're firing people who collect data. We don't have the data on whether or not, goods from other countries are actually made with Chinese parts. So China is going to continue to export to the United States through third countries. For America, this will be a lot harder, right? Because we're exporting to them like farm goods. How are we going to transship those through Vietnam? We can't. It's going to be really hard. So China, on one hand, China runs a trade surplus with us. So they will, if it was just bilateral trade, they would be hurt more by this cutoff, right? But it turns out they can still do a lot of circular shipment that gets to us eventually. Well, we can't really do that to them because it's farm goods are not like these components that get assembled into something else. Okay. So China's tariffs on us will hurt us maybe in the ballpark of how much our tariffs on them hurt them. Because our export manufacturing will be screwed. In the meantime, our own manufacturing will be screwed because we import a lot of capital goods from China. Now what we could do is try to, over time, we could try to reshore or friendshore those capital goods production. That's what Biden wanted to do, right? Biden wanted to say, okay, so we're buying all this like machinery and parts and stuff from China for our manufacturers and raw materials, rare earths, whatever. We need to source those elsewhere. So we were going to have projects to like eventually buy those from Korea, Japan, India, and all these friendly countries, right? Well, Trump doesn't want to buy them from those either. He wants them made in America. The problem is to make those in America, you need machines. Where are you going to get those machines? You need to import them. You're going to start with like rubbing sticks together in the forest and reinvent everything from no, you need to buy them from overseas. So like, so the point is that Trump, basically American industrialization will be hurt. We will be deindustrialized by these tariffs, and China will simply find other export markets or pump up its domestic market. China's whole economy isn't that export dependent anymore. It was 20 years ago. Now it's not. Like if you look at exports as a percentage of China's GDP, it's gone like off a cliff.
We're more export dependent than they are.
No, we're also not very export dependent in terms of total numbers, but like they're headed toward our level of non-export dependency. So like we're going to screw ourselves because we have they're just buying food from us and we're buying like machinery from them. So we're going to deindustrialize ourselves by refusing their exports and also not substituting them with things from other countries too. We're going to deindustrialize ourselves. They're not going to deindustrialize themselves by putting tariffs on us. They're just not. This is going to hurt American manufacturing more than it's going to hurt Chinese manufacturing. Because they're like, okay, fuck you.
Yes, this does seem a bit of a referendum on who needs who more. Does America need the rest of the world more, or does the rest of the world need America more in this sort of economic? Is that right?
Yes. And the answer is that the American actually needs the rest of the world more. So if you think about a trade deficit, what is a trade deficit? A trade deficit says, you give me a physical thing, I give you a piece of paper, an IOU. That's exactly how a trade deficit works. So now they have less IOUs and we have less physical things. Who loses? Like, we don't have the stuff, they don't have the paper. Well, yeah, I mean, like, it's a lot easier to make new pieces of paper than to make new physical things. All they have to do is rejigger their financial systems. We have to actually, completely reshape our entire industrial system. Right? And that's hard. It's hard, and it could be done, but it would require a lot of like industrial policy and really like sacrifices over a long time that Trump has no idea how to do, and he's canceling the industrial policy Biden was doing. He has no interest in doing it. He doesn't know how to do it. He doesn't know that we need to do it, and he's not going to do it. So we're looking at deindustrialization of America here. That's not going to help the forgotten man. That's not going to help your average dude get a nice blue collar job in a factory that makes all the like local chicks think he's a good guy to marry. That's fake. That ain't going to happen.
I guess going forward in the U.S. China, like, how do you expect this to play out? Like, do you think the reciprocal tariffs will remain? Do you think there'll be some sort of resolution?
I don't know. I mean, like, I think that we're going to see weakness in the real economy. I think that the real economy moves slowly because it moves at the speed of corporate investment planning. And when corporations stop planning new investments, then 6 months later or something, you get, the factories stop being built and the offices stop being built and the people stop being hired, right? Then you get unemployment. I think we're going to see unemployment go up. I'm not sure what's going to happen in inflation, because in the short term, what matters is which is more powerful, like panic or inefficiency. You got inefficiency from the supply shock of tariffs disrupting our economy, and you've got panic from people saying, oh shit, this is going to be really bad over the long term. So you've got panic and inefficiency, and if panic wins, then you get deflation, and if inefficiency wins, you get higher inflation. You could see either one of those, I'm not sure, right? But I think that you're going to see weakness in the real economy regardless. You're going to see unemployment go up. You're going to see the debt get harder to finance. You're going to see more turmoil in the bond markets. You're going to see turmoil in the U.S. financial system. You're going to see, a lot of finger pointing and blame and consternation. And Trump will try to. So what Trump will try to do, by the way, Trump will think the Fed can fix this. When he looks around for who can fix this, he's going to look at the Fed. And he's going to say, if the Fed prints money, everything will be fine. Print money, Fed. And the Fed will resist him, saying, look, we could have inflation from these tariffs. And he'll say, Powell, you're replaced. I mean, Powell may, I guess officially, legally, he has to wait till the end of Powell's term, but they're going to try to put increasing pressure on the Fed. And then when Powell's term is up, he will replace Powell with someone who's more inclined to print money. So basically, the idea is that Fed money printing can step in for foreign treasury buying. If the bond market gets disrupted, the Fed can bail out the bond market with money. So print money is going to be, and buy American bonds is going to be the next strategy. Now, there's a thing that happens when you do that called inflation. So that will swing us back. The idea is this will swing us back toward inflation. And that's true. And then you get inflation, which people really do not like. And then that can accelerate debt default. So he'll look at pressuring the Fed, and he'll look at debt default. He'll look for financial ways out because he doesn't understand the real economy or the need to do industrial policy to affect the real economy. Like Trump doesn't understand the real economy at all. He's a real estate man, right? He understands finance. He understands buying, selling, and he's like, borrow money, buy thing. If thing goes up, good. If thing goes down, default on your debt. That's been Trump's business model his whole life. And that's going to be his business model for America, right? And so he's going to look at debt default, and he's going to look at Fed bailouts, and Fed bailouts will be inflationary. So buckle up.
Antonio Garcia Martinez had this tweet. He said, the world does all the shit work. We create all the cool stuff, and everyone pays everyone in the money we print out of thin air. This cannot stand. Being sarcastic.
Exactly. That's right. We took the system that benefited us a lot. We convinced ourselves that everything was horrible. We told ourselves that like Biden was horrible, even though like everything was at everything highs. And, I was yelling economy's great from the rooftops, and people were saying their own personal financial situation was great, but the overall economy sucked because they watched negative stuff on TV and, podcasts and stuff. And everyone was telling them everything is horrible. So they're like, things have to be different. Things have to change. And so they, people elected this, these guys who don't know shit about the economy and who have really stupid ideas that they like, bad ideas they got watching CNN in 1985.
Right. Well, people felt that we were in an unstable situation. I think you sympathize with some elements of this in terms of our sort of, dependence on China and other countries for sort of critical sort of industries. But what you said is, hey, there are other ways of doing this. There are other ways of building sort of industrial capacity that don't involve tariffs.
Right.
And so if we could go back in time, a couple of months, and Peter Navarro brings you in and says, hey, Noah, you see our plan. What should we do? Instead of this plan, you would say tax cuts and just more austerity at the fiscal level.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to need austerity. And we're going to, and we need basically like austerity. We need to like build up an anti-China trading bloc where we have pure free trade with everyone but China. And then, but we also have to get better data to look at the component sourcing where these people are actually just shipping stuff from China through Vietnam or Mexico. So we've got to get, we would have to get better data, a new TPP, industrial policies, fiscal austerity. There's a whole list of things that I would want to do that they're not going to do. Like, they're not going to do any of these. What they're going to do is break things and look for new things to break. And then when that doesn't go well, they'll look for other things to break. They'll look around for fingers to point, blame to assign, and other things to break as a result, and they'll try to break the other stuff.
Sure.
And that's what they're going to do. That's what they've done so far. That's what they're going to continue to do. And like, you know, all your friends who voted for Trump voted for that. They voted for that, and they went on Twitter and they went on social media and they told themselves economists know nothing. Like, econ is bullshit. Trump is going to make America great. When Trump won the election, they posted like these, you know, the infinite America flag with all the millions of stars. Like, yeah, take over Greenland. Yeah, cool. You know, Trump is like, they assumed that everything would go fine like it did in Trump's first term, and that everybody who thought Trump was crazy was suffering from TDS, right? Trump derangement syndrome. TDS, man. You just have TDS. Well, no, the actual derangement was that Trumpism is a personality cult. And now you see, you know, all the dead end defenders, including some guys we know, like Chamath and Sean McGuire and some of these guys, they're just going to the mat for this. And they just spew out the most, like, just, it sounds like they're speaking in tongues when they talk about how the whole economy was fake before Trump. It was all just stimulus, and they're just this Chamath. Like, okay, fine, like Chamath's back for fake, sure. But like our economy was not fake. It was real, and you just smashed it. And like, that's what you get. And so of course Elon realized this, and Elon's like, oh fuck, and starts like calling Peter Navarro Peter Retardo, and starts like yelling for like no tariffs, and then behind the scenes like pleading for no tariffs, right? Pleading to cancel the Liberation Day tariffs. And they're just like, oh no, fuck off, Elon, bye, go away. And that shows that shadow President Elon was never really a real thing. You know, I made fun of it. I even said, actually, that would be good, you know, compared to what we're going to get. It would, a shadow President Elon would actually be better, quite a bit better than what we're going to get. And I was right. I was absolutely right about that. But then, you know, so Musk, that's to his credit. You know, Musk didn't just say, yes, master, you're so wise for fucking our economy, which, you know, Bill Ackman, you know, criticized Trump. And then when Trump did a partial walkback, he's like, yes, master, you're so wise. Like, he just toadied. And it was like, Cliff Asness, the money manager, said, he said, you know, a good thing about making a lot of money is that I don't have to wear a gimp suit. Quote tweeting Ackman. And you know what? That's right. I also don't have to wear a gimp suit, but it's just because I'm a little more ornery. You know, I don't have as much money as Cliff Asness, but I also refuse to wear a gimp suit, and I refuse to say this is good in any way. Like, congratulations, yeah, fuck yourselves. And like all the people on the tech right either have like just gone deeper into cult land and are like speaking in tongues to themselves, or they're realizing like, oh, we fucked up. This is insane. We summoned a monster that we can't control. It's like when your you know, magician summons like a demon from the pentagram, and then it's like, oh no, someone smudged your chalk circle. I get out, and then the demon like eats you and destroys your lab, and then like flies off into the night going hoo hoo hoo, and then yeah, that's what happened. So yeah, like the final shoes have not fallen here. More screwage is to come, because if you look at that bond market, you look at yields going up, dollar going down. That's bad. That's a continuing thing that's going bad. Like, it ain't over just because Trump reduced tariffs on a lot of countries to only 10%. You know, that the people are like, oh, it's over. The S&P went up for one day. We were wrong to panic. It was just TDS, man. TDS. Like, TDS, you're a retard.
Do you think Elon's break with Trump is temporary, or do you think it's unlikely he gets back in the...
I don't know. Elon's in a difficult position. He hitched his wagon to a moron who doesn't actually have to listen to anything he says. Like an insane moron. That's who Elon hitched his wagon to. And Elon now realizes that that's a mistake, and was like, that's why he was trying to throw Navarro on, you know, under the bus. But like, it turned out he didn't have that power. It turned out that Trump had the power, not Elon. that Trump strategically used Elon for money, for, Twitter and things like that. Trump strategically used Elon. And then when Elon was like, no, please do not destroy the economy. My businesses are suffering. America's economy is going to suffer, because Elon's actually smart and Trump's people are not smart. Then Trump's like, no. Because Trump knows when he has the power. And now that he has, America is more powerful than Elon Musk, right? And Trump rules America. Now, what can Elon Musk do to that? Like, back when Trump made his alliance with Elon was like the richest man in the world who controlled like one of America's major media outlets. And Trump was a political candidate with without many donors, without many allies. He was a semi-disgraced political candidate who was like under felony prosecution. And then like now, Trump is the president of the United States who has arrogated himself like all the amazing powers. And Elon is simply still a businessman, who controls one of America's media outlets, but not all of them. And who, has a lot of money, but, now Trump pulled the DJT scam, right? Grift. And now Trump got a little money for himself. That was a fundraiser. DJT was a fundraiser, the repeated pump and dumps, where Trump getting his own war chest so he can self-fund, right? Because he didn't have any money left from his real estate businesses. So he just, Truth Social was a grift, but it didn't make a lot of money. So Trump was like always looking for more cheap fundraising. So he went to crypto. So he did meme coins, and he pumped and dumped DJT and Melania and all that stuff again and again. And now he's been pumping and dumping again. And probably he had people doing stock pump and dumps with his tariff walkback. You saw like massive amounts of NASDAQ activity before the walkback, or S&P activity before the walkback, whatever is the highest leverage, right? And then so you saw people, there was obvious corruption. Obviously, this was like Trump allies knowing what he was going to do and like making a bunch of money off it. And you saw, good time to buy DJT, he writes, and then like, okay. So there's massive pump and dump that he's doing to raise money, so he doesn't need Elon's, bucks. He doesn't need Elon bucks. And so Elon has been disempowered because Elon's money is no longer needed. And of course, Twitter is helpful, but like Twitter is not the powerhouse it was. Like a lot of people left. It's not as much of an up to the minute news place that it used to be. And it's only one. Like TikTok's more important now. And Trump has made some kind of deal where he doesn't ban TikTok, or he just ignores the TikTok ban law that Congress passed. The ironic thing, by the way, is that Congress at any time could step in, override Trump's veto, and revoke tariff authority. And they won't. They won't. And Democrats won't, because Democrats are stupid. So like Gretchen Whitmer's out there praising tariff.
This hasn't been the most hopeful episode, but it's been comprehensive. And, we're calling the game as we see it on the field, and we can only pray for more sanity to come, but there's no clear path to it.
No, there's no clear path to sanity. All we can do is keep trying to stay ahead of what's happening by warning everybody, using what little media reach we have, and telling our friends that this is bad. But we're very late. We're late in the game. I tried to warn everybody. The country didn't listen because I'm nobody. The libs tried. The libs warned you. The libs knew, man. The libs knew. There's your cold open. The libs knew. And it's like, the libs did know, there were a lot of problems with the libs. They wanted to do like wokeness, DEI, whatever, stuff like that. Would you rather have DEI or a collapsing country?
Well, there was a tweet that said DEI stood for economy intact.
Economy intact. Yep. And like, I didn't like that stuff. And that stuff was on the way out anyway. We could have elected a conservative who wasn't Trump, or we could have just waited for that stuff to go away on its own because everyone hated it. Like, it would have taken a little longer. But no, we had to fight the woke mind virus by electing Donald Trump. And now we find out what happens when you elect this like tin pot Latin America style, like would-be autocrat dipshit who doesn't understand the economy and listens to the most idiotic advisors on the planet.
Let's wrap on that. This has been a great conversation. Excited for your piece on Capital Flight. And yeah, we'll keep covering it. As always, until next time.
Until next time.
Econ 102 is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen, In the Arena, The Cognitive Revolution, and more. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review in the App Store. You can keep up with both of our Substacks for written analysis of the topics we cover in the show at noahopinion.substack.com and eriktorenberg.substack.com. Thanks for listening.